Okay, the next thing to consider is the movement, the right to left movement of the ground and the columns that are eventually going to appear. So this is a side scroller game, so we are going to be scrolling the ground from right to left. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing that I want to do is I want to select ground, and I want to refer to a rigid body 2D that will, in essence, move stuff from right to left. The bird doesn't move. I almost said Angry Bird. The Flappy Bird doesn't move. Everything else is going to move, specifically the ground, the sky, so forth and so on. So the way that we're going to make that happen is, first of all, go ahead and select ground. We're going to add component, and then we're going to add a rigid body 2D. So in physics, 2D, rigid body 2D. There it is. I don't want this rigid body 2D to be affected by gravity. I only want it to be affected by the script that we're going to generate. So in order to do that, we'll change the body type from dynamic to kinematic. So in essence, what you've just done is you've said, I'm only going to be affected by script. Okay, so let's go ahead and generate script for the ground. So again, ground is selected. Scroll down a little bit, add component, and let me go over here to new script. And then we can type in whatever that new script is, and we're going to call this scrolling object. Press enter, and let me go ahead and clean up scrolling object. Let's put that into our scripts folder right there. Okay, so now in my scripts folder, here is scrolling object, and let me double click that so we can go into MonoDevelop. Alright, so I'm going to go to the top, press enter a couple of times, and type private rigid body 2D. There it is. And I'll create an object of this type, rigid body 2D. There's my variable. And in other words, what I want to do in terms of this scrolling object, which you know is part of the ground, that's the rigid body that we created, I want to refer to that. So what we'll do over here is in start, I'll say RB2D get component angled bracket rigid body 2D, close the angled bracket, open and close parentheses. So I need to create a reference to what is in Unity to the rigid body. How do I connect that? So when I went into the script, which is connect to the ground, that's going to be the rigid body that this belongs to. That belongs to the scrolling object script, which in essence is going to be the ground. So this right here is going to tie in script a reference to the rigid body 2D. The next thing to consider will be the speed of our rigid body as we move it from right to left. But I'm not going to set the speed, well, I'm not going to set the speed here just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here to game controller, and I want to create a public variable. So we'll say public float scroll speed, and we'll set that to -1.5 f, and the f just indicates that this is a floating type, and we are assigning that to scroll speed, which is also float. Now this is public. We have an instance variable. This is that singleton pattern we were talking about before. So I can gain access to scroll speed. So that's why I want to put this into game control, because game control is responsible for the game control. So anything that is game control oriented, I want to place into here to keep everything nice and organized. So now I can go back over here and type in RB2D dot, and then in terms of the velocity, we are going to assign that as follows. Assignment operator, new vector 2, and I want to get access to the scroll speed that is inside of the game control. So game control That's the name of the class over here. I need access to one of the members, and the way that I can do that is through this instance object, and the object that I want access to is scroll speed. So I can just type in scroll speed. Here we go. Now that takes care of the X direction. Now we also need to consider the Y-axis direction, and we don't want any movement of our objects in the going up or down, so we'll just simply say 0 over here. So in other words, what this is doing is it's going to set the rigid body 2D so that it moves from right to left at a certain horizontal speed and no vertical speed. Now we need to consider what to do when the game is over. So we're playing the game, side scrolling is taking place, but when I lose the game, I don't want there to be any side scrolling. So what we'll do is an update, which is being checked every frame, we'll have an if statement, and one of the public variables, so I'll say game control, inside of game control, so instance, is this game over state. And we set it so that it's a Boolean. That means it's either true or false. If it happens to be that that value, or that we are in the game over state, open and close curly braces, then we're going to say the rigid body 2D that's associated with the scrolling object. We're going to change that velocity to 0. And the way that we can do that is we can just simply say vector 2D dot 0. So this is a shorthand for writing 0, 0. We can just simply select that guy over there, close it with a semicolon. Okay, at this point you want to make sure that you save all of your changes. I am on purpose not going to save my changes because this is an error that I've committed before, and if you commit the same error, I just want you to be able to recover from it. I did not save my changes. I'm going back over here to Unity, and I'm going to run the game, and okay, so everything works fine, and there's no scrolling. Alright, so what do I have to do? Got to save my changes. So back over here, scrolling object, save, game controller, save, and I don't think I changed anything in bird, so that's why there's no save option. Fine. Now let me go back over here to Unity, and let's go into the game mode. Did you see that little bit of movement? Let me click, click. Very cool. So what are we doing? We are side scrolling. Now, since I just have that one panel, as you can see here, we are side scrolling it all the way out of existence. So let me do this. Let me zoom in here so you can see what's going on. And let's see here. Go back over here like this. And let me run the game. All right. So you can see, based on what's happening over here, what I need to do is get this panel to repeat itself over here. I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm going to put another one over here, a duplicate, and so then as this one, the second one comes into the field of view within our camera, then we'll take this. Once it goes out of the field of view, then we'll simply reposition it over here. So what's happening is I'll have two of these, and they're basically just back. They're going to be replaced at the right-hand side and then put into view and just side-scrolling from right to left. By the way, let me just have a little bit of fun here. Let me scroll in a little bit more. Hold down Alt on my keyboard. And let me change the speed. So let's see here. That's part of the game controller. And scroll speed negative 1.5. Let me change that to 15. Enter. And let's just see what happens. Woo, look at that thing go. Nicely done. Okay. I just wanted to see what would happen here. Changing the speed. Negative 1.5 seems to be a good rate. By the way, probably a good time for me to save my project and scenes. Okay, so to get this ground to, I'm basically going to take the ground and repeat it and place it over here. And so, as I mentioned before, as this first ground rolls or scrolls off camera, then the second one will scroll into camera, and then once the first one is completely out of camera, I'll just simply put it behind and then just keep this scrolling effect over and over and over again. Okay, well, first of all, let me go ahead and take this ground object, right click, duplicate, and I'll rename this guy to ground 2. Oops, sorry. Ground 2. And I want ground 1 or ground and ground 2 to be inside of its own folder, so that way it doesn't look all cluttered over here. I have ground up here and I have ground 2 over here. So what we'll do is we need to make sure that ground 2 is not selected. I'm going to click over here, then I'm going to right click and I'll say create empty, and instead of game object we'll say scenery. Now, before I do anything else, notice the position of the scenery. It's not at the origin, so what I'm going to do is click the gear, click reset. Now that this is reset to 0, I'll go ahead and drag and drop the ground into scenery. There we go. And also ground 2. Looks good. Okay, I need to move ground 2 to the right. Now, I guess I could do this. Ground 2 is selected. I could select move the selected objects item over here, grab that arrow and move it over like this. But it's not exact, right? I mean, I need to make it so that it's perfect right here. So let me undo the move. And that's one way we can do it. That's valid. Another thing that we can do is we can enter a value. Now, you'll notice that when I select ground 2, especially here with the box collider, it comes up with the size of this as 20.48. So what I can do is I can just simply take that value. Again, ground 2 is selected. Over here where it says position, x-axis, I can paste that. And so as soon as I paste it, you see what happens. Let me hold on Alt and scroll over. It now has this seamless connection over here. And in fact, let's go ahead and test it by going into game mode and see what happens. Okay, so let me click over here, and you can see what's happening above. There is no seam, and we're just going to keep on playing. Eventually, we do reach the end of our ground, and you can see that right there. And of course, if I stop clicking, we're gone. Wow. All right. Now, of course, I could take this ground 2 and make a ground 3, ground 4, ground 5, and so forth. So that would be highly inefficient. What's a better idea? Let's take this ground 1. Once it's off camera, then we're going to move this to the end over here, and we just keep on scrolling. And then we'll take ground 2 and move it before ground 1, and so forth and so on. So I'm going to create a script that's going to apply to both the ground and ground 2. So I'll select this. I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard. I'll select this so you see that both of them are selected. And now over here I'm going to add a component, specifically a new script. And the name of the script will be repeating background. And press enter. Alright, and now I'm going to go into that code area. So where is my script here? The repeating background, I'm blind here. Alright, let me go ahead and click the gear and scroll down and edit script. Alright, let's move our mouse pointer over here, and we're going to type private box collider 2D ground collider semicolon, and then we'll type private float ground horizontal length. Alright, so I have these two private values here, and what I want to do is I want to make sure that I have the collider, which is, in essence, what I really want is I want the size of the collider. Let me go back over here to Unity, and you'll notice that whether I select the ground or ground number 2, the box collider, remember when I took this size right here, the 20.48, and I just simply applied it over here to the ground on the x-axis. So that's what I want to do. I want to get access to this box collider's size, and then once I have that size, I need to make sure that that's going to be affecting the ground in terms of the position. for ground number 2 or ground number 1 as we rotate these back to back. So let me switch back over here to the code. So to do that, oops, I think I accidentally hit the space bar. Here we go. So let's go into Start, and we'll say Ground Collider. Keep on misspelling that. Get Component. Open angle bracket. We'll say Box Collider 2D. And then we're going to type in ground horizontal length, and that's going to be based on our ground collider dot size, specifically the x-axis, so the x component of the vector, and semicolon. So let's get access to that box collider, and so that's what this thing is going to be. That's going to be a reference to that. Now that ground controller, or ground collider rather, I need to get its size, specifically the x-axis, and I'll put that into a variable called ground horizontal length, so that we can do what I was talking about before. We can move the new ground behind the ground that's already scrolling from right to left, and we just keep this pattern going over and over and over again. Now let's create a function that will reposition the background. So let me hit enter a couple of times over here at the bottom, and we'll say private void. We'll call it reposition background. Open and close parens. Open and close curly braces. So this is a void function. That is, it doesn't return anything. It doesn't require any parameters to do its job. When we call it, we're supposed to reposition the background. All right, now we're going to type vector2 ground offset, and we are going to assign that to a new vector2, and then we'll just say ground horizontal length. We're going to multiply that times 2. I'm going to put an F over here to treat that as a floating value, comma, see, because the vector2 requires a float. So I could have typed in 2.0 F, but I could just type in 2F, that's the same thing. There is no y-axis component, so I'll just simply put 0 over here. In other words, I don't want this thing to scroll up or down. I need this thing to be repositioned back over here. Only the x-axis is being affected. So that's what this ground offset does. We are basically going to say that this thing is going to contain the value, a vector2 value, which really it's the x-axis component that we're mostly concerned of, where we take the ground horizontal length and multiply it times 2, because that's what I have over here. I have 2 of these back to back. All right, the next thing to do is we'll press enter, and we're going to type transform.position. This is the transform that applies to the object that's associated with a repeating background, which is the ground, of course. And what we're going to do is we're going to have to cast this as a vector2. And the reason why I do that is because I don't want this to be confused as a vector3 object. So we're going to say this transform is being treated as a vector2 transform. And specifically, what I want to do is I want to take the position, and I also want to add the ground offset. So we call this function when we need to reposition the background. We create the ground offset, which is a vector2 object, and then the transform of the ground. We're concerned about the position. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, so that transform position plus the ground offset, which I just calculated, when this moves from left to right a certain amount, that's when we want to reposition it. The next thing we'll do is we'll go over here to the update function, and we want to call reposition background when the ground has moved off camera, one of the grounds, whether it's ground 1 or ground 2. So what we'll do is we'll say if the transform, which is this is basically associated with whatever is associated with repeating background, and you know that what's associated with repeating background is the script. So if the transform, or the ground in this case, specifically dot position, dot x. And if that's less than, we'll put negative ground horizontal length. So what we're doing here is we're saying when this thing has moved off camera, when the ground or the transform has moved off camera, what do I want to do? I want to call reposition background. Okay, let's now save our work. So let's go over here to File, Save, or Command S or Control S. And I just want to make sure that everything else is saved here. File, yep, everything is saved. Bird, everything is saved. Okay, we are good. So now let me go ahead and switch back over here to Unity. And let me zoom out, because the effect that we're going to notice is that the ground is going to scroll from right to left, and then when this is out of camera, it will reposition itself behind this ground, and then the ground object, and then that'll continue to move right to left, and then that's going to reposition, so forth and so on. So let me go ahead and go into the game mode and start clicking. Okay, so you can look above and watch what's going to happen. Right now you can see the white frame. That's your camera angle or your camera view. And let's see what happens here. We're going up. Ah, nice. Okay, so as you can see here, it just simply moves it all the way to the beginning of the next ground, or the previous ground, I guess. Call it that. Let's see, it should do it again. Perfect. Okay, now focus over here, and you should not see any type of interruption or like we shouldn't see the seam, because it's just simply repeating it or repositioning it. Yeah, nice. See that? Now we can just keep on doing this over and over and over again. Let me do it one more time. Beautiful. All right, now we'll die. Get out of game mode. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but when the Flappy Bird dies, there's an additional little bit of movement. And let me just show you what I'm talking about. Let me go into the game mode, and let him die, and boop, and he moves back a little bit. And we don't want that. What we want is that when the Flappy Bird makes contact, that's it. No more velocity, no more movement. So to fix that, we'll go back over here to Mono Develop and select the bird script. And when there is a collision, what do we want to do? We want to set the, let me see, did we create a rigid body 2D? Yeah, well, there it is. The rigid body 2D. What we're going to do is set its velocity to 0. And the way that we do that is we can just simply say vector2 dot, and 0 is the shortcut, as you see over here. I don't have to type in parentheses 0, 0. I can just simply type in 0 like this. Let's save our work. Go back over here to Unity. Let's go into play mode. Now let's see what happens when he dies. Bam! Good. So let me try it again. Oh, no velocity, no additional movement when he dies. Very good.